Hello and a warm welcome to our webinar today with the topic Deutsche Telekom's Rise with SAP Journey, Navigating T-Systems, Private Cloud and Google Cloud. My name is Petra Schütz from Divya and I will be your technical support for this session. Before I hand over to the speakers, a few small technical notes from my side. The webinar will be recorded, but don't worry, it's just a recording of the presenter's presentation and the audio feed. As you might have noticed, you're muted and can't change that, but you have the possibility to write down your question and submit it through the question tool on your control panel anytime during the webinar. We will gather the questions for the Q&A session and answer as many as we can. If we don't get through all of them, we'll come back to you after the webinar. And now I look forward to the webinar and hand over to Hendrik.
Yes, thank you, Petra. And also, hello everyone from my side. So first of all, let me get that out of the way. I'm very sorry for my voice right now. I have everything here, warm beverages to prepare myself so that the voice holds for the next hour. But yeah, it might not, so just out of the way in the beginning. But with that, let me start and set the landing, the starting area for this webinar and give you a brief overview over the over the speakers, and after that, the situation we are in with RISE. So we have 4 speakers for you today: Joop Jansen, CFO of Deutsche Telekom IT; Christian Bleim, Senior Technical Sales Specialist at Intel Corporation; Steve Wainwright, Global SAP Sales Director for Google Cloud; and myself, Hendrik Oebermann, Head of SAP AO for DETAG, RISE, and cross-application services within T-Systems. And yeah, as I stated on the next slide, I would like to give you a rough overview of in which situation are we in, why do we hold this webinar, why is DTIT on its RISE journey, what actually is RISE. You probably have heard of RISE with SAP. It's quite the big talking point in the industry right now, as SAP is doing a big push towards it. And basically every big SAP customer has to, in some way or form, get used to the fact that RISE is a reality. What is RISE with SAP in actuality? Basically, it is a bundle offering of licenses and also AO services based on cloud operations for your whole SAP landscape. You can bring as much or as little SAP workload in there as you want. And whatever you bring in there, you get from SAP with a customer contract between the customer and SAP as one whole offering. Within that offering, you have all of your basic infrastructure and operational needs. And you also, as stated, have your licenses, and you have kind of a software as a service offering. What we have as a kind of special situation in this setup is we as T-Systems are also a premium supplier for RISE with SAP. So the customer holds the contract with SAP for the whole business, licenses, operations, infrastructure included. But for several reasons, which we will go into this webinar, the customer might opt that they don't want or cannot have SAP operate the infrastructure and the AO services underneath, but they would like to see a premium supplier like T-Systems operate on their infrastructure, on the FCI infrastructure in our case, or on specified cloud infrastructures, like in this case, Google Cloud. You can see this as a rough overview on the left side. So the overall contract is still with SAP, but within there, several layers are in a magenta color, and that is to reference the fact that these layers are being handled and taken care of by T-Systems through these contract between SAP and T-Systems and us as a premium supplier. What are reasons that a customer might opt for such a setup with a premium supplier? I already stated one, that they might have special dependencies on their landscape, or like within DT's case, Deutsche Telekom's case, they also, of course, would like to have as much of the service in-house, basically, within the same group as well. But you also might have other reasons for that, which we will see on the next slide. So a customer might also, of course, not only have an SAP landscape completely on its own. A customer might also have services on top. I'm sorry, on top of the offering, the Rise with SAP offering that you can get directly through SAP, which is only the infrastructure and the usage of that infrastructure. If you want any services on top of that, like consulting or migration services, if you want application management services, or other non-IT services, non-SAP IT services, you cannot get them from SAP. So you can get them from an industry leading partner like T-Systems in this case, with quite a lot of experience in those areas as well, and also in the case of Deutsche Telekom, long-term partner in those areas as well. And you would like, of course, as a customer, to have a as much similar as possible operating model and dealing model and the same suppliers as possible. So if you have your non-SAP IT business with T-Systems, it makes sense to have your SAP IT business also with T-Systems, and that then works in this overview, as you can see right here, with RISE Premium Supplier setup of T-Systems in there. So that is the rough overview of what is RISE, RISE with a Premium Supplier in there. Why do we have it? And we will go into a little bit more detail what we as T-Systems offer in such a setup as well. But first, I would like to hand over to Job to give a rough overview about DTIT and also why they are on this journey.
Yeah, thanks, Hendrik. And good morning from my side. So Deutsche Telekom IT. Deutsche Telekom IT is the internal IT provider within the Deutsche Telekom Group, which has many operating companies across Europe and also now in the US. Deutsche Telekom IT as internal IT provider spends roughly 1.6 billion euros a year on IT. And with that, we provide close to 800 applications. And believe it or not, we also have around 10% of that, 83 SAP systems or SAP applications. We do this over just over 6,500 servers. And just as a sizable reference, we have 35 million customers in our CRM systems. Deutsche Telekom wants to be the leading digital telco across the cross-Atlantic setup we have. And in that sense, we as internal IT providers support that with providing products to our customers, like the app you have on your phone, but also, of course, all the backend systems, including SAP, to be able to bill, account, and also control or free our 200,000 employee tracks through their journey with Deutsche Telekom. We also looked at SAP RISE. We looked at it 4 years ago for the first time. At that time, we decided not to go for the RISE model, but stay with the on-prem versions. But December last year, we reconsidered this and we investigated how Deutsche Telekom, with this close to 80 SAP systems, would move into the RISE model. And on the next slide, I want to give you a brief overview of our journey to the RISE model. So we have this 80 applications roughly in 1,200 instances at the moment, and we are targeting to consolidate several of those systems or instances into a limited number, and at the same time migrate to different cloud environments. We have selected 2 cloud environments, one for security reasons, the telecom provided, or T-Systems provided FCI. It's a private cloud solution. And then we have the Google provided cloud for our public cloud offering. It's a bit of a schematic overview, but our target is by 2030 to come to the final stage of our cloudification and also the migration to RISE, and in the same time upgrade to S4 where needed. In that sense, we have selected, we will reduce our landscape roughly by half, and we will bring a 2/3 of our landscape to Google and roughly 2/3 to the private cloud. There will be still a portion that will not be on any of the clouds, will be on-prem. So we will have a remaining legacy at the end of the 2030 contract. That will mean that we will have a remaining portion that will not be supported by SAP maintenance, but where we will go to non-OEM maintenance. We have started in 24 with the first migrations. So we have our first instances of SAP live on both the Google platform and also on FCI. Actually, we have the largest instance at the moment in RISE in the DACH region, live on under the RISE contract. So the migration is progressing well. We aim to finish the cloudifications by the end of 26, and then we will continue with the consolidation of systems and also the S4 transformations. Of course, this whole journey brings a lot of technical and operational challenges. And I will now hand back to Hendrik to dive into some of those challenges.
Exactly. Thank you, Job. And as Job already stated, in 2020, 4 years ago, Deutsche Telekom already looked at RISE with SAP and what it can offer and how ready basically Deutsche Telekom was for this step. And at that point in time, on one side, the benefits were not that high, but on the other side, the technical challenges were still way too high. Over the last 4 years as a company, Deutsche Telekom IT has worked on that. And we also see that from an AO perspective on what the landscape has done since then. Several S4 transformations, several HANA conversions they have done. Several BW4 conversions as well. So the landscape is at a better place right now than it was 4 years ago. But the landscape is still very complex and historically grown. As you heard Job just say, over 80 SAP instances, way more than what you might want to have in the future. And quite a lot of them have grown around specific business needs and grown for business areas within Deutsche Telekom that are not even existing anymore in that specific setup, but they are still used in some extent. And there is quite a lot of optimization potential in there, as you also saw on the last slide. But currently, still more than half of Deutsche Telekom IT's SAP landscape is, for example, still running on Oracle DB. So what you can imagine is that this is a problem for a customer that they need to solve together with strong partners like Google and us as ST Systems, because Oracle DB is not supported in under the RISE with SAP umbrella. Everything has to go to HANA, and that of course means if you could operate Oracle database in the past without really taking care of how big your database gets, because storage is not that expensive, and you can just work with it, and you can also have very expensive SQL statements on an Oracle database in the end. That is something that is historically grown, and that needs to change now, because if you change from Oracle DB to HANA database, that also means a change from database on storage, on disk or SSD in actuality, to a database within the system memory. And that also, of course, brings tremendous cost increases with it if you do not do it carefully and properly and optimize your landscape. And that optimization of the landscape you also saw in the last slide a little bit. What DT is doing there is also reducing the landscape down to a clean core, so to the systems that they really need in the future, and consolidate workload, consolidate functionalities in core BW systems for tax purposes, in core financial systems, in core HR systems, in core ordering systems, for example. So these central core applications that you need to have your business functional and running, and on that they need to consolidate and really also consolidate the functionalities. But also, as I already alluded to in the beginning, DT has quite a lot of workload outside of a RISE environment that they also want to have their partners take care of. They have a very, very big landscape of non-SAP systems, of workplace services, of job management services, of archive services that are all surrounding an SAP landscape or serving different needs within the company. And they also want, of course, that to be as closely possible to be operated in the same way as the SAP business. But what then also comes with it is that we have seen Deutsche Telekom wants to also make use of Google Cloud Platform and the benefits that a native cloud offering can give them. In the current setup, in many instances, this is not possible due to data restrictions they actually have in their systems. So this whole cleanup process of the landscape and reduction of the landscape also fulfills that that they can minimize their data sensitive applications to a very small amount, ideally, and that is an ongoing effort to maximize the cloud native offerings. But on the other hand, for everything that is still reliant on data privacy and compliance, they need this private cloud environment and they need one partner to do it all over all of those instances, and also ideally is able to shift workload from one to the other once they have solved data privacy and compliance issues to make use of even more benefits of a native cloud offering. And that one partner shall, of course, operate that all in a similar manner so that it's for the customer is all easy to digest and easy to consume. And we as T-Systems can offer such a thing, which we will see on the next slide, where I will give you a rough overview of how we as T-Systems achieve that we can offer a completely same delivery model in eyes of the customer, so exposed to the customer, no matter what platform they choose or what OS they choose or what the SAP application might be. So it also doesn't matter if they are operated from onshore in Germany, from nearshore somewhere within the European Union, or even from offshore in India, for example. It doesn't matter. Our delivery model always is the same on these FMO platforms. So and this is what we as T-Systems achieve through our multi-hybrid cloud environment, or HC, or our specific SAP folder of that SMHC, so SAP multi-hybrid cloud environment, that is set up in such a way that it has several control towers for the specific infrastructures you would like to deploy on. So in this case, our future cloud infrastructure, German-based private cloud infrastructure with a BSI certification. So it is also certified to handle German ICE-only data workload. And also you have the possibility to deploy your systems on the GCP environment. And then on top of that comes the OS layer, where we have one OS automation that on the lower end, so on the lower level, connects to the deployed infrastructure that we deploy after the same standards in set flavors that our OS automation can work with. And that's how we achieve in the end that also all of our SAP systems can be deployed left and right. It doesn't matter. We only have to work out with the customer the specification, what they need of infrastructure size. Do they need the infrastructure on an FCI, or do they or can they use a public cloud environment, native cloud environment, to reap the benefits of such an environment as well? And once we have done the architectural guidance together with the customer and the due diligence and have worked out how the landscape is going to look like, we can deploy these systems on either of those platforms. And as I already stated, we can also shift from one to the other. I'm sorry. We can also shift from one to the other rather easily. And for the customer, it is a lower migrational effort because it's the same delivery model. I'm sorry. You have to bear with me for a moment here. On top of all that, we have what we call our Cosmos, our cloud orchestration, sub-management, operational services, where we have, doesn't matter on which landscape, we have the same monitoring tools, we have the same sub-diagnostic tools, and we have the same sub-automation that we run over everything. So, meine Güte, I'm sorry. And then also we ensure that through the infrastructure as a code deployment we have through our Cosmos interface, everything is always conformant, and we do not have to set up any of those systems where we deploy SAP environments on manually. So that is how we ensure, of course, that also compliance and standards apply through all of those landscapes. So one operator on our side can operate an SAP system on the FCI environment or on the Google environment. Doesn't matter from his point of view as well. System functions the same, and also the infrastructure can be handled through our Cosmos environment. And now if we can go to the next slide, please. The colleagues from Google will now be able to tell you a bit more about why should DT push as much workload as possible towards Google Cloud environment.
Thank you, Hendrik. And if I could give you a medal for struggling through that, I definitely would. Really appreciate your participation in such poor health. Good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Wainwright. I'm the Global SAP Sales Director at Google Cloud, and it's my pleasure to talk to you about our partnership with SAP and Deutsche Telekom today. The picture I have here is one I love, because if you look closely at it, you can obviously see that Christian Klein is on stage with Google Cloud CEO Thomas Kurian. This picture was taken at Sapphire in Orlando in 2023. And what strikes me about this photo is the warmth between these two individuals. They really are good, close friends, and the relationship is founded on trust and collaboration. And that's going to be an overriding theme of my presentation, how these three giants in the technology and telecoms industry are coming together, Google, SAP, and Deutsche Telekom, to provide you with a partnership that you can rely on. And the partnership with SAP that I'm going to focus on now really starts with your journey to the cloud. Many of you are thinking about RISE, contemplating it. It's a big step to move from your private cloud environment or your on-premise environment to the cloud. And we want to give you that reassurance that this is a journey we can take together. We'll de-risk it for you. And once you're on the cloud and you've achieved a clean core with SAP, you can really start to think about bringing agility to your operations, reducing your cost of operation, and importantly, starting to drive innovation. Innovation that starts with simplifying your data, combining all that rich data from SAP about your inventory, your manufacturing, your customers, with all the wonderful anonymized data that Google holds about consumer behavior and preferences. Imagine if you could combine those two together to start to run a predictive supply chain. And then the next phase of your journey, which is a really new advent in the technology landscape, is generative artificial intelligence. Already, we're seeing customers start to think about how they can apply that to their SAP environments. Google is a world leader in generative AI. We invented the T in GPT, Transformer, and you can now start to see Gemini appearing on Android devices all over the world as your Google Assistant. And really, this is starting to power the way we interact with devices and technology and improve services that we as consumers receive. But also, it can really start to optimize business processes, as well as optimize the way that your SAP systems run in the cloud, self-healing, self-optimization. And importantly, it can allow you to bring accelerated, enhanced customer experiences directly to the front line in the way that your IT systems interact with customers to provide services directly to them. So let me start on this journey by looking a little more deeply into our relationship with SAP on the next slide. So every morning, 20,000 SAP developers located across the globe who are building S4 by writing code and building the S4 product, the latest releases, the new enhancements, the new features. Guess what? They do that development on Google Cloud. So S4 is developed on Google Cloud and it's tested on Google Cloud. So you can be assured that if you take the RISE journey with SAP, Deutsche Telekom and Google Cloud, you're using a solution that has been developed and tested on our public cloud platform. Now it goes way beyond that. Ariba, which many of you I'm sure use as a SaaS-based application, runs exclusively on Google Cloud across the globe. SuccessFactors, the same. And Qualtrics and many other applications are running as a SaaS service, which you obviously are not aware of, but they just are there available because they're running on a best-in-class cloud. And that's a real foundation to our relationship. What you may not be aware of also is the fact that Alphabet, Google's parent company, runs one of the largest SAP systems in the world. 3 years ago, we decided to take the big step from running an on-premise Oracle ERP environment to SAP in the cloud to allow our business to scale. And at that point, Google was around 40,000 employees. And now today it's around 200,000 across the globe. And the business has increased hugely in terms of revenue, complexity of operations. That SAP system processes 55 billion transactions a month. So think about every download from a Play Store, every payment to a YouTuber, every single transaction like that is going through that back end. So as you can imagine, we rely on that to run our business, and we can't close our books without that being highly available and highly performant. So we've scaled that. It's always up. And importantly, we use AI to keep the core clean, but to drive innovation around the edges. So we've invented services like predicting invoice flows, currency hedging, and also automatically translating our financial report into 130 different languages for publication at the end of a quarter, interacting with suppliers through Gen AI agents to improve their experience of dealing with Alphabet and getting their invoices paid faster. These are all services we've developed around the edge using AI and keeping the core clean. In fact, many of the services that we have created have been incorporated in the core SAP Treasury application that many of you are probably using today. And that's another example of how innovative and collaborative our partnership is together. Now we're going forward into new areas, such as trying to use Gen AI to optimize the way our cloud runs, and also doing ABAP code conversion. So as you can appreciate, we do a lot of ABAP development ourselves. Now we're remediating that code using generative AI and driving incredible productivity in our development teams. The third element is the open data solution. Now, many of you rely on the data in SAP, and you're probably aware that DataSphere is not only the data warehouse of SAP, but it's the semantic window into SAP. And so it allows you to explore and mine and understand your SAP data without compromising the integrity of the data, the securities and the policies of it. But imagine if you could combine that with other public data sets and Google anonymized consumer insight to create a predictive enterprise. Well, guess what? You can, because jointly with SAP, we've created an engineered federated integration with DataSphere and Google's BigQuery petabyte scale serverless data warehouse. So what it means is that I can basically amalgamate those two data sets from the SAP world and the Google world and use AI and ML models within Google's BigQuery to drive a predictive enterprise, to look at what consumers are searching on, to look at where they're traveling, to look at how the weather might impact shopping, and many other data sets that we're gathering, combining that and using it to influence how we manufacture, where we distribute our inventory, and how we position and price it to customers. And if we look at the next slide, we can understand a really important step. Next slide, please. Thank you. Is the underlying reliability. You can only do all that innovation if you're super confident in the infrastructure you're running on. We offer the highest SLA in the industry at 99.95. You're probably wondering how we do that. Well, it's really simple. The network that runs YouTube, runs search, runs Gmail, runs Google Ads is the same network that your SAP applications will be running on. It's the largest private cloud network in the world today. So Google's network is 6 times the size of the public internet. It's an entirely private network. So if you decide to run SAP through RISE on our network, your data will be encrypted on every step of the journey, whether it's at movement or at rest. It will stay inside that private network, which also makes it much easier to facilitate the setup of DR and HA. You don't need load balancers because effectively you're operating on a private network using your own private IP addresses. It's just like running your own network inside your own building. And that's the power of it. We also have a feature called live migration, which means that you don't experience any downtime when we need to do routine maintenance with Deutsche Telekom from the hypervisor level downwards. We automatically create a copy of your live VMs and run them in another VM environment. That's just one example of the many features that we now offer. And we're baking GenAI into that service. So we're incorporating cloud best practice, all of Google's experience running its own SAP environment and referencing SAP notes. And GenAI is looking at the environment all the time, making recommendations on how to tune and optimize that and make sure that it's error-free. Let's move on. All of what I've just talked about is now being recognized by Gartner in their Magic Quadrant. So if you take a look at the journey here from 2021, when Google really started its baby steps into the SAP world, and now we have over 1,000 live production customers across the world, Deutsche Telekom obviously being one of our most notable, but in Germany here we also have organizations like Deutsche Bank and Deutsche Börse and Metro and Siemens Energy running on our cloud. And we're very proud of that fact. And those customers experience all of this uptime and availability that you are referring to. And now we can see that Gartner is actually recognizing all of the messages that I'm conveying to you is appearing in their Magic Quadrant as a manifestation of this capability and performance. But it goes beyond SAP. We can run many mixed workloads, whether you're running a VMware environment, whether you're now running Oracle legacy applications or databases. You can run those alongside your SAP system in the RISE environment. And also we offer customers the ability to run their Microsoft applications, and we offer a license optimization service. So you have the chance to reduce the cost of your license maintenance with Microsoft. That's a new service that we're offering as well. So really leading reliability, leading security, and the ability to innovate once you come to our cloud. Let's take it home with the next slide. I want to end with a new innovation that we've just created and are starting to share with customers and partners alike. I've talked a lot about our generative artificial intelligence, and I mentioned Google's large language model and tool Gemini, which many of you will see on your devices today. We've used that capability to create a service, a free open source service called Gemini Boost. So what is it? Well, effectively, we've taken the SAP Activate methodology, which is their methodology for cloud migrations, for RISE migrations, and we basically ingested that into Gemini and started to create prompts which provide users with ways of automating the SAP migration to the cloud. Now, if you think about this for a second, this is obviously quite a time-consuming effort. There's risk involved in it, and also it's very expensive, typically because you're contracting with a third party to provide those services. Many of the tasks are time-consuming, such as creating test data, end-user documentation, code remediation. Well, guess what? Gemini is automating many of those tasks. And through a focus group of customers, we tested our thinking and we showed them the initial prompts that we created. And they validated our perspective that we are confident that we can reduce that cloud migration effort by between 20 to 40%. In fact, I was talking to the vice president of ERP at one of the world's largest life science companies recently, and he told me that this technology could potentially reduce his standard operating procedure documentation by 3 man-years. So if you'd like to know more, please reach out, and I'm happy to talk about how Gemini Boost can accelerate your journey to the cloud with Google, with Deutsche Telekom and SAP, reduce the risk and reduce the cost of getting to the clean core and driving all that innovation I talked about. Thank you very much for your time today.
Right, so it's my turn now. My name is Christian Bleim. I work for Intel. My primary job is to help our hardware partners such as Google Cloud as well as OEM partners to certify their solutions that they bring to their end customers for any SAP workload. As you know, Intel has been a strong partner to SAP from the very beginning. HANA was launched, if you might remember, back in 2010, I believe. And ever since, our Xeon processors have been optimized to give the best to you as an end customer. With this slide, I would like to show you a nice overview of the latest Intel-based Google Cloud instances that might be relevant for any SAP or non-SAP workload. On the yellow part, you see general, I would call it general purpose instances that can be used for applications such as NetWeaver that might not necessarily be HANA based, but with the latest generation, the C4, which is based on the 5th gen Intel Xeon processor family, also codenamed Emerald Rapid, you see significant performance improvements as well as TCO improvements and cost improvements in that matter. And I will share a customer example on the next slide on that. And in the blue and the green bars, no, stay on the slide, please. In the blue and green bars, you see instances that are SAP HANA certified instances. As you know, there's a rigid process that needs to be applied, and these instances are certified in the sense that they give the best performance that you as an end customer need for your HANA database. There are multiple t-shirt sizes, we call them. For small and medium installations, you might go very well with a C4 instance, which scales up to 1.5 terabyte. And for very large solutions, you would go with X4 instance, which I will also spend some time on in going forward, which scales up to 32 terabyte on a single instance. And this is groundbreaking with this latest release. Up until last year, where the limit was 24 terabyte. And with the latest generation, we are able to scale up to 32 terabytes. Now, next slide, please. The next slide shows a real customer example that we have supported. A customer was looking into the newly launched C4 instance, and it has shown that consolidating, in his case, 5 times N2 instances to a single C4 instance brought multiple performance improvements. So you had, what the customer saw was 50% increase on SAPs. And at the same time, he was able to save costs. So it's basically 2 reasons to migrate, or it's a win-win situation for the end customer. So you as an end customer should, or it would be recommended to continuously monitor what your partner has to offer and make sure that you're always on the best infrastructure as you move forward in the journey. Next slide, please. I would like to spend just a moment on the newly launched X4 Google instance family. This family is a bare metal choice. It comes in 3 flavors: 16 terabyte, 24 terabyte, and 32 terabyte. The 16 terabyte, as we speak today, is SAP certified and has an amazing SAPs performance. It's almost 1.4 million SAPs on a single instance. This is a new record. Because it is a bare metal instance, you as a customer get 100% of the CPU and memory resources assigned to you. So there are no bottlenecks in that respect. With this new family, you get 2 times more virtual CPUs compared to the previous generation, which was limited to 24 terabytes. And therefore, you get a lot more performance out of this instance. The family, or the X4 instance family, offers fast HANA restart. And as Steve mentioned in his previous presentation, you get world-leading reliability of 99.95%. So maybe move on to the next slide to summarize briefly the newest hardware aspects that we have to offer. GCP, Google Cloud, and Intel and Deutsche Telekom have had and will continue to have a strong partnership and continue our journey in innovation. I talked about the C4 instance family, which comes both as a standard family as well as HiMem. HiMem is certified for SAP HANA. C4 brings significant cost and performance improvements over previous generation. And last but not least, the X4 bare metal family, which allows you to scale up to 32 terabytes, which is unique in the entire SAP market. Thank you. Handing over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Christian. So we have heard now quite a lot about what Google Cloud and also the Intel architecture underneath that powers it is capable of, and why Deutsche Telekom should go with, as I stated in the beginning, should go with as much workload as they can to this offering. But there also might be instances where Deutsche Telekom can sadly not use all of that, what was just outlined to us. These cases, as I alluded to in the beginning, most likely are due to data privacy reasons. For that, we as T-Systems, as the premium supplier, have worked with SAP on an extended service portfolio item that only we as T-Systems can offer within the RISE with SAP area. This is called the Secure Data Services Extended Portfolio item. This extended portfolio item basically caters to exactly those needs. You have German eyes only or specifically restricted data privacy and compliance rules. It must not only be German-based necessarily. Any onshore-based data security classifications fall under this, and quite a lot of them we as T-Systems can also deliver. For example, we have onshore delivery for Spain, Switzerland, Austria, England, France, or even Mexico, for example. So we are also in that regard a global player and can offer often onshore services depending on what location you are from in such a secure data service area. Specifically for German eyes only data, what is very relevant is that the shared environment you see there on the picture in the right, so the left block on the picture on the right, is a BSI certified private cloud environment. So that is set up in such a way that we have complete separation of customer data and complete separation also of network, similar to what Steve stated on how GCP is set up in your private network. But in this instance, on an infrastructure, on the physicalized infrastructure underneath, that it's based in Magdeburg-Liere in one of our own data centers of T-Systems. And through that set is then being handled in onshore data centers and has onshore administration. So the whole data center is managed by onshore personnel, and then the services on top, and this is where also the secure data services comes in. All of that, what you need to hand over an SAP system as ready to use in the end towards a customer, all of those services also come from onshore personnel. So from German-based people that are installing the SAP systems, administrating the SAP systems, handling the firewalls, handling the certificates, the updates, all of that. Whatever you can imagine what needs to be done to have an SAP system up and running and usable for the customer, all of that is being done by onshore people. What is important and what I alluded to also in the beginning, it doesn't matter if you have if you use the SDS service, our secure data service, or if you don't use it. Doesn't matter if you go to GCP or FCI. You will always have the same standard operation model, one time delivered by by contractually secured German personnel or onshore personnel. In the other hand, whatever the customer might specify, nearshore or even offshore. What we can also do, as you can see on the right, should the customer have even stricter or tighter regulations than the BSI certification of our shared environment, we can set up a customer workload domain. It's what we call it on our FCI, dedicated only to that customer. So in that case, the customer gets the benefit of a private cloud, of our FCI private cloud, but has a dedicated environment that is only there for him, down or them, down to the physicalized hardware even. So there is also still that still that option for defense contractors, for example. They might opt for such thing, or specific banks where we also have customers not within the RISE contract, but within our SAP workloads outside of RISE, where we offer such a model. And what's also very important is that there is minimal adjustment for the customer between the SDS and non-SDS services. As I already stated, the delivery model in the end is the same. What is, of course, a little bit different is you have other situations with on-call duty and also rates. But in the end, in terms of how do you interact with that service, it's the same. So yeah, through that, we ensure maximum intercompatibility between the services. And also looking at the clock, I don't want to go into much more detail, and I would like to hand over to Job to give us the final summary of the situation for DT. Thank you.
So on a very high level, we're now 1 year in this journey in RISE, and I can share with you some learnings we have taken since last year, December. So first one, which was key for us in taking the decision, we require as a company flexibility. What do I mean with that? It requires not having to take a t-shirt off the rack, but we need some confection made clothing. So we need applications that go fully under the RISE model. We need applications that remain on-prem. We need to retire old applications. We need to combine flexibility. And in our contract landscape, where we started the presentation with, we found that flexibility so that we can work with a set of partners to get our solutions, our instances installed in the right way. And that brings me to the second learning, the ecosystem. So we very quickly moved away from only talking to SAP. We started combining it, as you can see also in this webinar, integrating other partners that are crucial in the whole delivery chain. Of course, T-Systems, we are part of the same company, but although we eat in the same canteen, it's still treated as different companies, and we have a commercial relationship. But also Google, also SAP was at the table, and we have our integration partners and other partners being part of our discussion. So the ecosystem helped us to weigh in different opinions and come to this capitalization on the needed flexibility. What we also found very quickly is that our beloved strategy around SAP to kick the can down the road. So we did up until end of 23 as little as late as possible when it came to upgrading our SAP estate. We had to swap it around the moment we signed the RISE contract. So we decided to go for a full-fledged planning until 2030, which for us is the magical date, where we have for every SAP instance, and as you have seen, we have quite a lot, we have a clear decision on where we go, which cloud version, which are up for retirement, what are the requirements for account security and compliance, etc. So that planning has now been made. We put a huge architectural effort on that, but that's now a complete difference compared to how we were on the road 2020 to 23. One advantage that we were very clear on at the beginning that we wanted to have is a multi-cloud strategy. So we have selected 2 clouds, one public, where we bring a significant amount of workloads with Google, and one a private cloud version with T-Systems. Why do we have that dual setup and don't select one or the other? It's because of specific requirements, and that comes back to this flexibility learning at the beginning. Then talking a bit about the RISE constellation. So in my talks to SAP, I learned that RISE is still relatively new. It's been in the market for 4 years now, but despite being a 4-year-old software as a service solution, we still had to solve many small problems and also larger problems around availability, disaster recovery, which we anticipated at the beginning that SAP would already have standardized or provided solutions for. But it's also very clear that RISE is not a fling of the moment. It's something that is here to stay. The model is pushed by SAP, but it's also a future-proof model, and it will, as was communicated by SAP, take away the need to move to whatever new version T5 they will bring versus S4. So now we will do the final upgrades, and then we will go into a normal software as a service continuous upgrade. So I believe that RISE is here to stay and will be the model of preference for SAP. I tried to capture it very quickly. We covered 6 of our key learnings over the last year, and I think we now have 8 minutes for take some questions going forward. I would ask the other people to join back. Yeah.
Thank you very much for all the content you shared. Now it's the time for every one of you who has questions. Take the chance and ask them to the experts we have here right now. I do have some questions here already. I think the first one, it came in pretty much quite at the beginning. I think it was in your part, Hendrik. The question whether the SAP RISE you were talking about is the one that is undergoing the C5 audit at the moment.
Yeah, so generally we are having the C5 audit on our offering as T-Systems, which we base the offering towards SAP as a premium supplier in the RISE. Yes. And I can also share with you that the C5 audit was successful. So that is also very, very nice to hear. So also now for RISE customers, we have that certification and can move forward.
Thank you for answering that question, Hendrik. Let me pick the next one. I think that came in during your part, Joop, so I would address that to you right away. What about the SAP systems within the Viking contract? Can you differentiate what are the similarities to RISE?
So basically for us, it's the same experience. If they are Vikings, so which is direct to T-Systems, we have the same experience, the same tooling when it comes around incident handling, optimizations, and requests. It's just, it goes directly to T-Systems and not through the SAP loop. Why did we select some systems to stay with T-Systems and not go to RISE? Mainly the, so to say, overarching central platforms that cover many of our operating companies fit very well to the RISE model because it's large scale. They have multiple connection points to different countries, while some of the more specific SAP landscape that are for the German market or for the Hungarian market, they fit better under the Viking contract. And that's why we made that separation. But for the experience of our users, of our IT employees that handle the problem management and the ticket management, there's no difference in experience between the 2 contracts. It's almost seamlessly the difference, undifferent.
Thank you for clarifying. Let's pick the next question. SAP states that this model is only available for customers with a certain high license volume. Do you have any more information on that?
Generally, yes. So in the end, it's the customer that specifies if they have the necessity for a premium supplier within the RISE with SAP contract environment. SAP has a certain threshold where they state, okay, you are big enough to, or not big enough to, are to be eligible for what we, SAP, for what SAP calls private cloud tailored edition. But also a smaller customer, in quotation marks, from SAP's point of view, not big enough for a private cloud tailored option, might have these security specifications, which we talk about. And then they come again into the umbrella of, okay, they should go in talks with the premium supplier and look with that. But that has to be worked out with SAP and the customer directly, because as you saw in the first slides, SAP is the contract holder.
Okay. Thank you. Another question is which Linux is in Klammern. I don't know the word for that. I'm sorry. Which Linux operating systems is used by the T-Systems / SAP for running a SAP stack?
Yeah. So basically, very quickly, SUSE Linux Enterprise Edition, so SLES, and they are then always the newest supported OS version.
Perfect. And speaking of clean core and technical reduction of the landscape, what else is there for a company to achieve a clean core?
Maybe I take that one. So the clean core concept, which is very well promoted by SAP, and as Hendrik mentioned, is also one of our technical drivers. We are approaching this through, I would say, a very typical way. Is we try to govern any customizations. So in the migration process, so we're very focused on the technical migration, but during the technical migration, we of course try to optimize and get to as close to the clean core as possible. And we try to govern any customization, so additional ABAP code, reduce that, get strict approvals, and we put the approval level to what we call board member -1. And so this is BLT level, business leader, who have to decide if that customization, that specific process setup is really needed to be a customized part of the code. And by making that such a big hurdle to jump, we aim to reduce our customizations significantly. And as a second tranche, which will help us to achieve clean core, is that we're consolidating a lot of functionalities on the same platforms. And that will mean that we will standardize the setup significantly going forward.
I also add to Joop's comments that this is where generative artificial intelligence can play a role in code remediation. So taking ABAP code and converting that into a more modern code base that can run on BTP, for example, is a great example of how you can use this new technology to speed up that move to clean core once you've gone through that due diligence that's critical that you've just articulated.
All right. Shall we pick one last question? What is T-Systems' focus on SAP modernization, particularly with tools like SAP Synavio or Westtrax? How are the gaps addressed that cannot be realized through SAP standard solutions?
So there are a plethora of tools and options and gaps, as the question stated it. So I will not go into specifics on those tools mentioned there, but what we as T-Systems can offer and what you saw at the ground setting slides in the beginning, there are of course quite big or smaller gaps in between what you as a customer want or need and what SAP can offer in the RISE umbrella. And we as T-Systems are not only offering AO services for SAP, for which I'm responsible for, as stated, for DTIT and also for the overall RISE business, but we are also offering system integration services. We have a complete SAP system integration area, quite big one actually, worldwide set up as well. They are also seamlessly working together with us in that RISE setup and can then offer services on top. So the little magenta box you saw on the top left and on the second slide there, you can then see that you can get a direct contract with our T-Systems SI, and they then help you also, again, all under one umbrella. You only have to interact with T-Systems, and we take care that it's as seamless as possible for you. And then you can have these services as well in the context of a RISE premium suppliership.
All right, thanks for answering that. I would like to thank everyone for asking those interesting questions. I would like to thank you especially our speakers. Thank you, Joop, Steve, Christian, and Henrik for taking the time today for giving us such great insights into this topic. And I'm looking forward to meet you the next time in the next webinar. I wish you all a good day and take care.
Same to you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.